Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Launch School podcast. Today we have another student, Terry Lee. You want to say hi real quick, Terry?
Hi, everybody.
So, Terry, you've been here at Launch School for about a year now and getting towards the end of our front end courses here. Do you want to maybe just kind of give a quick background about your experience and how you got into coding and specifically maybe how you found Launch School and what your experience has been so far?
Sure. I graduated from school with a degree in graphic design, but I quickly transitioned to product management pretty early on in my career. So I've been doing that mostly for the last 8 years or so. I've worked in a variety of industries, going from online advertising to mobile gaming and digital books. So, but mostly in the tech sector and in all types of products and areas. And my relationship with coding, so actually in school, my program was called Computing and the Arts. So we had to take 2 semesters of Java. So that was my first experience with coding. And I remember really enjoying it. It was object-oriented programming. So, we learned like a lot of things that, we actually learned in launch school. And I just remember enjoying that. So I've always carried that experience with me. But I continued on with my design courses and I always had some relationship with coding. I've taught myself HTML and CSS over the years. I've even done some, Flash action scripting. So it's always something that I've been interested in. And your last question about how I found Launch School, I did a lot of research. When I decided that I wanted to go into programming, I, started, like most people doing Codecademy, free code camp, those things. But I realized that that wasn't the style I was looking for. I really wanted to learn programming really well, and it just didn't have the depth that I was looking for. So after a lot of research, I found your program and did the free prep course, and it was really good. So after taking that, I decided to enroll, and so I've been here for almost a year. I started it in April of last year.
I didn't know that about your background. It sounds like you were in this sort of peripheral technology roles or non-tech necessarily, but always within a technology company, right?
Right.
Did that have any influence on you in terms of just being around developers all the time, being around technology?
Yeah, definitely. Being around it, like I somewhat kept up with technology and trends and all that, and always exposed to code somehow. Like as a product manager, you work very closely with engineering, so you can peek over their shoulder, see what they're actually working on, and you're just always exposed to it.
Yeah, and did you ever think like maybe I can just transition to a developer like at my current company as opposed to taking some sort of training program? Was that ever a thought that came up?
No, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people experience this, but once you stick in a career, you kind of just stay with it. And product management is a good career. You have a lot of influence in the company, and it's very interesting job. So I did enjoy it for the most part. So I didn't really consider switching within the company.
Right. In fact, a lot of developers I know transition into product management almost as a
right,
not necessarily a lateral move, but like a promotion of sorts, because product does have a lot of power, and in a lot of development teams actually take their direction from product teams. So,
right.
But at the end, you decided you want to be a programmer, right? You felt that was kind of closer to your true passion, or
yeah. I mean, I've always wondered if I could make it as a developer. Since I've always had interest in it, and the decision is like very closely related to my last job. So, my last job was at Nook. I worked in a division that created a platform for reading digital textbooks. And I was responsible for the digital catalog, the commerce site, and all the backend services. And actually, it was my first exposure to, I guess, say, modern web development. The team was Ruby, and we worked in an agile development. So
This is the Barnes& and Noble Nook e-reader?
Yeah, we were just a division. So like they have the separate e-reader, and then we did just a software platform for digital textbooks for higher education.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And the best product managers I know are actually very technical as well. So that combination is really, really good. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. So I mean, never really heard of Ruby before or Agile, and so just being involved in that, it was really cool. It was actually the most technical position that I've had. My PM roles are usually more design or marketing focused, but it was a challenge. But it was just very interesting seeing all the tools they had to, quickly build websites and, backend services.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that Nook was a Ruby backed in the back end there.
I think it's just my division. I wasn't sure what they used for the actual e-reader, but my division got moved into Barnes& and Noble College, which was, they manage bookstores across college campuses all over the country. So it's more related to software, so no hardware.
Yeah, gotcha. And so I don't know if you want to talk about this part, but I know you were laid off eventually, and when I talked to you before, and again, you've been with us for a while, so we've had sort of conversations through the last 12 months or so. You didn't really express a lot of panic. Didn't really feel like, you were down or anything. You were just very, very focused. Do you want to maybe share that experience a little bit? Because I know there's a lot of people out there who are undergoing career transition, and sometimes it's involuntary. So how are you able to navigate that?
Sure. So, I mean, in the tech industry, companies come and go pretty often, actually. You're not given a lot of time to show that your product is successful before, they cut it off. So, of course, I was shocked with the layoff, but it's nothing like unexpected for me. But as I was preparing for, interviews for product management, I was thinking like, is this really what I want to do going forward? And as I said, being exposed to this new type of development and development environment seemed like something that I would prefer to go in. So yeah, I saw it as a chance to make a career change. I wasn't sure. A lot of anxiety over whether or not it's too late, right? In the tech bubble in Silicon Valley, it's still very young. So I don't consider myself old, but, in over here, it's like, yeah, that's one of the worries. Is it too late?
Right. Well, there's always bubbles, and there's always, I've been through 2 bubbles myself, and what always happens is that there's a bounce back, right? And if you're not committed to the software industry, then when the bubble bursts, it's time to go to pharmacy school or something else completely different, go to law school or something. But the people who are around, right, when the bubble bursts, become some of your closest friends when times are good again, right? Because you sort of kind of live through that tough time together. But when I say tough, I mean a little bit less money, right? But this is why for people at law school, I want people to not be afraid at all of this sort of micro cyclical cycles, because it will happen, right? It will happen. And when it happens, the mindset almost has to be double down on learning. It's going to come back up, and be prepared when it comes back up again. Otherwise, you're right. Companies come and go. And the key thing you have to rely on is yourself and your skills, right? And it's not in the long time ago where you work for one company and you can expect to just stay there for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
So I guess another follow-up question is, what was the thing that allowed you to focus on education, like learning? Is it just because you're in a fortunate financial situation that you didn't really have to worry about, let's say, paying your bills or something like that? Or because I can see that if you're, when people are laid off or have some involuntary action being taken against them, the very first thing is probably like, oh, how am I going to pay my bills? And not really let me go back to school.
Yeah. I guess I'm more fortunate in that I'm able to take time off to kind of study stress-free. I mean, it's not completely stress-free. I didn't expect to take, this long at the outset.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were times where like, oh, am I taking too long, whatnot. But, my situation allowed me to continue going forward. And that helps a lot to do this full time. I actually, in the middle of the back-end courses, I took a contract job where I had to commute to San Francisco, and there's like 1.5 hours each way. And I just couldn't do it part-time. I was trying to code on the train or do it when I got home, but I was too tired. So I realized if I really want to be serious about this, I have to do this full-time.
Right. And you're working at a law school full-time or nearly full-time, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's already taken 12 months. So that, I think sometimes people are surprised by that, but there's just a lot of material if you really want to learn it well. And just for the record, you're doing really well at law school. I don't think you've not passed an assessment yet, right? So
yeah,
you're doing great. So I guess it was funny that you brought up you didn't think it would take this long. I'm kind of wondering, how long did you think when you first came to us?
Yeah, so I mean, you compare it to other boot camps out there where they promise, 3 to 4 months, right? And I knew it was going to take longer, and you are kind of adding up the hours you have estimated for each course, and then so it came out to like 6-8 months, I think. But you never factor in how much time you need to prepare for each assessment. At least for me, I spend a lot of time preparing for assessments. I'm going to make sure that I can pass it the first time around. So I think students definitely take that into account. And I mean, these days, I just don't retain information as well as I used to before. So it's a lot of reviewing and going over the course material multiple times to make sure I really, really understand it. But for me, that's a worthwhile investment. So even though it's taking longer, as long as I'm, really understanding the material, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. And I really encourage people to think long term, right? In the span of 20 years or whatever. I mean, an extra week or two or extra month or two is definitely well worth your time. And this is the advantage, if you will, of mastery-based learning as opposed to classroom-based learning, right? It's you can go fast or slow, but typically I think what happens is you feel rushed in this classroom-based learning, right? And you feel like you just have to cram or sacrifice understanding because you got the schedule to meet. And even if you are able to keep up the material, something happens sometimes, right? Something happens in your personal life,
right.
And you're just busy that week, but you have a midterm, right? And what can you do? So in mastery-based learning, if you're busy that week, that's okay, right? You're just going to have to take an extra week, right, to make up for it that busy week. But don't sacrifice clarity and understanding. So, and how do you feel right now? So do you still feel a little bit of anxiety when you sort of see it's like, oh, it's been about a year, you're almost on the front end, but you're not quite done with the front end yet. Do you still sort of feel that coming up once in a while?
No, I mean, of course, like a little bit, but I can see the finish line from here. So I think as I get more confident in my skills, I mean, I don't feel as anxious. It's more about whether I can get a good job.
So why do you feel like is it just like you're feeling more confident? You know that you're getting better. Like, how do you know that?
Yeah. So, in the JavaScript courses, there's some pretty hard programs in there, and sometimes I would have to like peek at the solution, and I can't figure it out myself. But as I go on, I'm able to code things on myself. Like I'm actually in the middle of the assessment for Q49, I believe, and there's one practice assignment that's really tough, but I was actually able to do it by myself. So like, unless you actually do it, you don't know. But so just being able to do those types of problems that are very similar to the things that I worked, I was a product manager for at my old company. So I can see myself doing okay or doing well in an actual production environment.
Yeah, and I know that you fairly recently, about a month ago, you told me about this hackathon you went to. Do you want to mention that? And I wonder if that experience also sort of solidify your your belief in that you are gaining confidence. Because sometimes I think it's hard, right? You're just studying and you're not sure.
Yeah.
You're pretty sure, I guess, because you're spending so much time studying and learning to what seems to be extreme depth. But I guess, is there always in the back of your mind is like, oh, maybe someone over there, is learning more than me. But it's always nice to get external validation, right? And I feel like maybe that hackathon experience was a little bit of that. Do you want to maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so for those that may not be familiar with the hackathon, it's an event where you basically have a given amount of time to create a product that leverages some company's technology. So my hackathon, we had 24 hours to build a product that expanded on this company's video teleconferencing software. And it's a very short amount of time to come up with a working demo. And I actually went in not thinking that I was going to do any coding at all. I had just finished the HTML and CSS portion of launch school, and I went in as a marketing product person, thinking I was just going to do design and come up with, the product ideas. But when we were actually coding, the developers I was with, they were more front end. So while they were kind of struggling with the back end server side of it, I was able to contribute by doing all the HTML and CSS and working with Node, even though I've never used Node before. So that part solidified, the confidence that I was learning enough or learning the foundations so that I could quickly switch from one framework to another.
And so this is before the JavaScript course?
Yeah, I was doing mostly HTML and CSS for them. And then where the backend knowledge came in handy was when I had to create new routes in their program, where they just had to show me once. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep creating routes for all the pages that I need. So they only have to tell me things once, and I was able to pick it up and do it on my own after that.
And that's because of your experience in like courses 170 and 180, all the backend courses. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. If they did it in Sinatra, I think I'd be able to help with the backend. But because it was Node and it was only 24 hours, I didn't have time to learn any of that.
But the fact that they showed you where the thing is, you kind of just mentally knew that, okay, routes. All right, I know what that is.
Oh, yeah.
And just tell me where to put it and the syntax, and I'm good. Yeah, that's really good. And I think that's the advantage of learning things to a fundamental level, right? Is that you can pick up new frameworks, higher level frameworks very, very quickly. And even before you learn JavaScript, which is surprising. I thought you were already in a JavaScript portion and not yet Node, but good. And so that experience kind of just gave you even more confidence about what you're learning and how it pertains to, real day-to-day development. Is that right?
Yeah, it solidified the confidence in what I've learned, but also, if anyone has a chance to do it, I encourage it because it also solidified the fact that I want to go into development because it's a very intense experience and you're working very closely with your teammates, and it is very similar to, a future job in development where you're working with each other, you're constantly pushing code to Git, making sure there aren't any like merge conflicts or anything like that. So if you like that environment, then development is a good direction.
Yeah, was this one of those hackathons where you showed up and you didn't know your teammates, or did you know your teammates beforehand? I
just went with a friend who is not a developer, and you basically form teams there. So you actually meet a lot of people, and so everyone's like really friendly. You can learn a lot of things from other developers. The ones I work with were like really good about showing me things and explaining. So it's definitely a really good learning experience.
Right. I've been in a couple of hackathons, but it was like we had a team beforehand, maybe weeks beforehand, and we would think about and brainstorm about the product we're going to build. And then when you show up, it's a 24-hour thing. When you show up to do it, you basically then build it. But it's, the idea is there, and we've been talking about it on and off for maybe a couple of weeks. But all the assets and code are created within those 24-hour period. But I've never been in one where kind of you just match up randomly with people.
Yeah, I think it might have been like a smaller hackathon. And ideally I would have wanted to have been more prepared and come in with a team and an idea. But I think a lot of people are kind of like, there were some teams that definitely came in that way, and you could tell by their finished product that it seemed like they'd been working on it for longer than 24 hours.
Right, definitely.
But it was my first hackathon, but so I didn't know what to expect. But if I do participate in more, yeah, definitely would rather come in with a team with an idea in mind.
Yeah, cool. That sounds great. Now, is there any sort of advice you can give to people who are maybe earlier in the launch school curriculum, in terms of whether technical or whether just kind of dealing with the anxieties around, a mastery-based learning program and such a long one like ours? Any advice for them?
Yeah, I think it helps. Like, at least what I did was I treated this like a college course. So I took it very seriously. I take a lot of handwritten notes, so that's what works for me. And just make sure I review the material over and over again. So yeah, just like taking it to that level where it's not, like a vocabulary, just like coding as you write, or as you read. But what I liked about this structure is that you have readings, so you have a chance to really digest the information before you even start coding. So I make sure I understand before I even open up my text editor and start writing code. So I do like that format. And also, this happens at all stages of my learning experience, but it's easy to get really overwhelmed by problems. So, I mean, it happened to me recently with the JavaScript course, but it always helps to, like you guys always say, like break it down into smaller problems and just start piece by piece. And, you work through it. And what I do is, as I'm working through it, and it's not the prettiest code, I keep a list of things that I want to refactor later on.
Right.
So once I get it functional, I'll go back and, clean it up and make it look nice and all that. But yeah, it's especially when it's early on, like you just stare at a problem and you have no idea how you can even approach it. But yeah, the videos you have on problem solving are really helpful, especially the parts of where you break it down into smaller digestible pieces. So
right.
That's the strategy that's helped me.
Right. I think that's really good advice. I feel like this is almost the singular most important attribute to be successful, not just at launch school, but learning anything, but especially in a program like launch school where we don't compromise on mastery, right? Like you can't take a C and get to the next course, right? It's like we put
right.
a high demand on proficiency, and so it's like we force you to understand things. And I get a lot of emails when people write in long paragraphs about their background, and then at the end, it's like, what do you think? Am I a good fit for launch school? And it's hard to tell. It's very, very hard to tell for me. But there are certain attributes that definitely correlate with being successful at launch school. And it really has to come down with exactly what you just said, which is study habits. So it's not even correlated with technical experience necessarily, right? Like if you have a computer science degree, yeah, it's a good sign. And it's a good sign only because you've done something difficult, and that you probably had to study pretty hard to get it, right? But if you don't have a computer science degree, if you don't have a lot of programming or technical background, it doesn't mean that you're not a good fit for launch school either, right? As long as you know how to study. And as you said, as you alluded to in this conversation, which is, you take multiple passes through the courses and, the books and the material that we put in front of you. And I just know that when I talk to people, sometimes they find that surprising. It's like, whoa, I'm supposed to read this thing twice or 3 times?
Yeah.
And so if you've never sort of studied very seriously, it's sometimes a surprise. And I have conversations sometimes where people say, well, I'm pretty serious. I work pretty hard. But if you dig deeper, it's like, what does serious and studying hard mean? It doesn't really mean much, right? It's just, if it takes you to read something twice to understand it, like that's okay, right? Or 3 times. Let's say it takes 3 readings to understand something, but you read it twice and then you say, hey, look, I studied really hard and I still don't get it. What do I do? It's like, you're almost there, right? Just one more. And so everybody's different. And that's the key, is that some people, especially who've had to study very deeply before, like getting a PhD or something like that, that correlates well with
Mm-hmm.
success in our program. So people who have, it's not that if you have a PhD, you will do well, or you have to have a PhD to do well in law school. Not at all, right? You just have to like be a good student.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
Right.
yeah, good advice. I think that's it. Any last words, Terry, before we go?
No, I just want to say I've really enjoyed this program so far, and especially the assessments. I think those are definitely like confidence building. If you're, because they're not easy, and as long as you put in a lot of preparation, I do think it will give you the confidence to do well in job interviews, which is what I've been part of. Like I've been sat in on tech interviews and things like that.
Yeah, that's
I like that part a lot.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's perfect. All right, thanks for coming by, Terry, and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.